Bienvenidos, amigos. No, hola, amigos. Bienvenidos a .NET API Review. Yeah, that was closer to what I meant to say. We're back to having a scrolling list, probably because we didn't meet last week. Um, but at least futures at the bottom of the screen, so we're not too far behind. Today I'm hoping for 5. Let's see how close we get. Weird. All right, first up is runtime 125134 unsafe evolution attributes. Half the .NET org, you're up.
So unless
Only
the
only
language is the
half the
most
org?
presented, I can.
I can take it, Tanner. Um, so yeah, this is part of the general unsafety memory safety is better. Memory safety push that we're doing in the language and in the runtime and in the libraries, where we are explicitly marking things, marking methods, marking properties, etc., that need to be unsafe to be called, that you need to be in an unsafe context in the language. Um, the reasons for this are many, and I think if anyone wants to dive into those more, you can go over to .NET Designs and read about that. Anyone watching the call, I think the people in the call probably have an idea of the history behind that, so I'm not going to dive into it. The proposal here is for two different attributes, one of which is applied by the user and one of which is applied by the compiler itself. Excuse me. So we have the first one, requires unsafe attribute. At one point in the proposal, this was automatically applied for the user if you put unsafe as a modifier on the method. Uh, the language design team has decided to pull back from that level of breaking change. So now this first attribute is what users manually put on their methods, manually put on their properties, all the things listed in that attribute usage attribute to indicate that any caller of these so attributed members must be in an unsafe context, whether that's an unsafe block, whether that's inside of a method with an unsafe modifier, type with the unsafe modifier, etc. If you use this API, you must be in an unsafe context, and reviewers of this code, of code calling these things, should pay attention to making sure that the various invariants, that pre and post conditions that this API expects are being followed. Otherwise, memory safety bugs could occur. Um, there is also a second attribute, the memory safety rules attribute. This is applied by the compiler at the assembly, or not the assembly, the module level. When a module is compiled with the new rules on, the attribute is applied with a version number. That way, if we decide to rev the rules again in the future, we can increase the version number and say, okay, we're on version X instead of version Y, which may end up happening if we ever decide to do ownership, but we'll see. That's a whole separate can of worms. Currently, both attributes are proposed to be in the system runtime compiler services namespace. This is an artifact of the original design where users were not applying requires unsafe attribute by hand. My personal preference would be that requires unsafe attribute be in a different namespace, namely because we don't usually have attributes that we expect users to interact with, like literally interact with, as opposed to just have the compiler do it behind the scenes. We normally prefer those to be in a different namespace, probably system diagnostics code analysis or something like that. System that the I think it's in the alternatives section, the exact other potential API. Yeah. Currently, Andy's prototype has it in system diagnostics code analysis, along with the nullable analysis attributes, along with a couple of other things that Rosalind pays attention to. My preference would be that it be there with them. But there are some potential reasons to have it in system runtime compiler services. It's very possible that if you're using this attribute, you're also going to be using some of the other attributes that are defined in there that we haven't always been as strict on that rule on. So mileage may vary on whether you think this should be in A or B. Either way, I believe the proposal otherwise kind of speaks for itself. The only other thing that I wanted to mention that we wanted to get basically pre-approval for, right now, requires unsafe attribute is limited to constructors, events, methods, properties. There was a request from Jan Kodas that we likely will do to allow unsafe on fields. So even though it's proposed not in the list right now because it's not implemented right now, we'd like to get pre-approval to add attribute targets.fields later if we need to. I think that's my opening spiel. Yep.
I was just going to chime in with the namespace part where, so my own preference is actually that it be in compiler services. And there's a few reasons for that, some of which is covered elsewhere. One of that is, while we do tend to have the split of attributes that users end up applying themselves being not in compiler services and compiler specific ones being in compiler services, it's actually more like a 50-50 split in compiler services. You have things like unsafe access or skip locals init. You've got all of the caller member name attributes. You actually have quite a you've got inline array. You've got quite a lot of these other attributes that exist in compiler services as well, where I think the nuances is more users either aren't applying it themselves, or it is a more esoteric feature like overload resolution priority. And I think given that this feature is unsafe, it is specifically there to annotate unsafe code. We are trying to push users away from unsafe code. And additionally, all of the other unsafe attributes are in compiler services. And if you're using this attribute, you are more likely than not importing compiler services and interrupt services anyways. I think it makes more sense to me personally for it to be in compiler services.
I guess I wanted to ask before we get into the nitty-gritty of which namespace should it be in. Does anyone have clarifying questions on the proposal?
I have just a quick clarifying question regarding the field thing. I'm assuming the compiler itself, regardless of the attribute usage, is going to warn if you like, if we were to add field now, but the compiler didn't support field now, would the compiler issue an error basically saying requires unsafe isn't allowed on this field? I'm wondering, I'm wondering if we could just add like all attribute usage now and leave it up to the compiler to say what it at this moment what it's happy with and what it's not.
Jan, I don't know.
I think currently the compiler just ignores the attribute if it's on other targets. So no, there would be no warning.
Okay. We do for some attributes, right? We check to make sure that the attribute is only used in a way that we're happy with.
Yeah, we are kind
Otherwise-
of inconsistent with that in the compiler,
I see. Okay,
I
thanks.
guess.
We normally rely on the attribute targets to filter out locations it's not allowed to be put on, like, or member types it's not allowed to be put on. And then we error when you use it in a way on a supported member type that is otherwise not allowed.
I
That
see.
makes sense.
So it's kind of a dual layer thing.
Yeah. Andy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to note that there's one more piece of context here, which is that there are other attributes that requires assembly files and requires unreferenced code, requires dynamic code. Those attributes also exist. They behave analogously, and they exist in system diagnostics code analysis. So that's the other reason to put it in system diagnostics code analysis. There's also one kind of esoteric thing. We added the runtime async stuff into compiler services, and that's in .NET 10. And the interesting thing there is that we added a class called async helpers. And turns out async helpers is a common class name. And so we've gotten 1 or 2 reports of people actually like hitting naming conflicts. That's not like a bad thing, or it's not something that should decide everything, but it does mean that importing compiler services might have detrimental effects in certain circumstances.
Fascinating.
That makes sense. At the same time, presumably system diagnostics code analysis is also important in a whole bunch of places, in particular because of the nullable attributes.
I think Andy was more saying that if a location had to import system runtime compiler services now, it would introduce potentially more conflicts than system diagnostics code analysis, where the names are fairly specialized, as opposed to async helpers, which is more general.
Yeah,
Oh,
but at the same time, I'd
just as
expect,
oh, sorry.
at the same time, I'd expect that all the places importing compiler services are using unsafe code already. But like that is most of the places using unsafe are importing compiler services already, so they likely already have that conflict.
Steve?
I have a really terrible 5-second memory. I have no idea what I was going to say.
So we get things like array pool, which we would have a long debate of whether or not we would apply requires unsafe onto. And nothing about array pool probably uses anything else from the unsafe notion of doing non-provable casting or pointer arithmetic or whatnot. So I think that there definitely is a zone of people or places where requires unsafe would be applied that wouldn't already be importing compiler services, but they probably are importing code analysis.
Wait, are we adding this attribute to array pool?
I said there could be a long debate.
Okay, sorry. I missed that qualifier. Because in the proposal, it seemed to be talking about memory not managed by the runtime. It seemed a little more. Yeah, I mean, I think what this does actually does affect perhaps the namespace, like, or where we're going to apply it, right? Like, if we're mostly going to apply it on like unsafe dot whatever, that's already in compiler services. I don't know. I feel like it kind of goes with it. Don't have a strong opinion yet, though. Like, I think both namespaces are fine.
Yeah, I know over the years there have been a number of times that, like, I can hear in my head Levi saying, I wish we had an attribute that would require someone to say unsafe. Because things like array pool, like, that's where we now introduced back into .NET the notion of 2 people writing to the same memory without knowing it. Because if somebody screws up the return pattern, we have violated memory safety. We haven't, we're not going to AV, but we can't prove the execution of the program anymore. And so that would be a place that we would debate putting unsafe, unless it's already on the plan that it should be marked unsafe.
Welcome to the debate.
Yeah. Exactly. It's easy to say, I wish we had this attribute when we don't have the attribute, but once we have the attribute, then everything gets harder. So, but
I would generally say that while my preference is for system diagnostics code analysis, it's not like a strongly held, it's the end of the world if we go with runtime compiler services. I just feel like it's better in diagnostics code analysis.
Yeah, mine's also not strong. I just feel in the opposite direction. Probably because I write unsafe, and I find as someone who writes unsafe code for performance in other areas, I am using far more compiler services and interop services than code analysis ever gets used.
Yeah, I mean, so I can say anytime I've ever gone looking for the unsafe type, so I still write code in like, you know, VI from a terminal window. I add system runtime interop services because that's where we should have put it, but for some reason it's in compiler services. So I kind of feel that most of the things that are in compiler services that we make people call are in the wrong place. Now, granted, once we've already done the bad thing, maybe we should continue to do the bad thing because local consistency and all, but I feel like everything that's in here that gets written by someone that's not the compiler was a mistake. Call conv may be the exception. But no, that belongs in interop services because it's about interop.
I feel like overload resolution priority is the exception because that is a compiler affecting thing. It exists for the compiler.
Yeah, but
doesn't this arguably exist for the compiler, like at a conceptual level?
And inline array got mentioned, but these are the
No, not
sized
not
inline arrays.
inline array structs, but the inline array attribute that you use to create an inline array struct.
Yeah, but once we added the inline array structs, the attribute has very little meaning anymore.
I mean, it's heavily used in interop where you have max path, which is 256. You got all the cases that are 32. Igor actually just put up a PR where the majority of the interop cases we translated from fixed size buffers to inline arrays could not use these built-ins because they're not sufficient.
Fair enough. You need to take off a second sock, I see. I guess 16 already requires taking off a second sock. It's me joking that these numbers are big. No. Okay. Moving on. Yeah, I mean, but again, I think that means that inline array really should have just been in interop services because it's the time that you're mostly going to use it.
Yeah.
But yes, given things, so really it comes down to what are the cases that we expect this line of code to be written, and are more than let's say 25% of those cases going to be in places that wouldn't have already had to import compiler services. The consumer shouldn't care because only the compiler will say you need to be in an unsafe block. So this doesn't leak out. It's only about the person who writes the line of code.
Correct.
So do we have a sense of how often someone would write this and whether or not they would already be importing compiler services?
I think it comes down to your array pool question. Like I'm reading the, C# Lang proposal, and it's talking about, if you reference unmanaged for memory. And honestly, I think if it's exclusively to that, compiler services makes slightly more sense because you probably have it anyway. If there's even a chance we apply this to array pool, it should probably go in like the diagnostics namespace or whatever.
But someone using array pool doesn't need the namespace. This would only be for the implementation of array pool. So it's not a question of whether array pool needs it or not. It's across all unsafe, let's just say in corelib, for example. How much of that unsafe code needs code analysis versus how much of it needs compiler services?
If I have, like, if anytime I use, like, a rent return pattern, I need this, like,
No,
and
you
then,
don't.
yeah.
That's
But
not-
I do though, right? Because that's unsafe if I don't return it like correctly.
No,
It just
that
like
means
memory
that
pool.
that means that you need to wrap your use of rent in an unsafe open bracket, close bracket.
No, I get it. I said anytime I implement a thing that has rent. Anyway,
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but I still disagree. Like if it's not unmanaged, it's just like, oh, you have to manually implement like managed lease unlease, then it should be in diagnostics. Like even if it's for the implementation only, not the caller. But at the same time, I think that's really bad idea. So I would just put in compiler services and say where this is only for unmanaged stuff.
I want to pull a slight detail out of this. Something that I think you started to say, Stephen, but I wanted to elaborate on it. Today, it may possibly be true, and I don't know. Like, this is not me casting shade. I don't know that most of the people that use that are going to immediately put this on a method are already using compiler services. What I'm concerned about is that this is kind of viral, right? It's not, hopefully not, as viral as, say, async. But if you're using this, or if you're using an API that is unsafe, it's very possible and likely in at least some minority of scenarios that in fact it's going to code to your callers, right? So the first level is, yes, the person who is adding this was already using compiler services, right? They were already in this world. But then the second level order is going to be, well, I can't safely encapsulate my usage of this. Whoever's using me has to encapsulate their usage of this, and I wasn't using compiler services, right? And then maybe it goes to a third level. Hopefully those scenarios are more rare. We want to encourage and guide people to part of this is minimizing the surface area that you mark as unsafe and requires unsafe. But if it does, expand out a few layers, that could mean that that what is true today, or what could be true today, that that people who are using unsafe already have this namespace imported, it might not be true after a few levels of viral expansion.
I would personally expect that this is not viral in the same way as async, specifically because we have a known and intended way to stop the virality, and we expect most cases to stop that virality as soon as possible. Otherwise, everything is unsafe because almost every part of the BCL involves unsafe code at some layer, including internal calls to the runtime itself.
Right, but some of the things, so, just my eyes locked onto the line applied implicitly for extern members, and it's like, right, so take something like, the CS Win32 project. They may have exposed all pointery things with int pitter, which is the classic way to avoid writing unsafe, but most of the stuff that they're doing is they're going to call a native function which requires somebody's managing the memory that's not the GC. So CS Win32 may be all interrupt services, not compiler services, but all of their stuff should be marked as requires unsafe because they are an interop layer. Now, again, people will argue they want to use CS Win32 so they don't have to write the word unsafe, but, have fun with that. So yeah, I feel like compiler services is a thing that we might regret, and code what's its analysis is a thing that we won't regret.
Yeah, I know it's not exactly what we're debating here, but I know it's like tempting to broaden the usage of unsafe, but I do think it's not that helpful. Like, a lot of things are conceptually not safe. Like you could have bugs, but in C# it's always referred to unmanaged stuff. And like, we know it's not super viral, but it's kind of, I mean, it's nice to have, not all languages have it. But yeah, I wouldn't want to expand what it means too much at this point.
Yeah, notably, the concept of unsafe here is not unmanaged. It is memory safety. And we have very explicit design docs covering what memory safety is and how it impacts. So it's not type safety. It's unless that type safety ends up impacting memory safety. Um, it's not conceptual unsafety or anything like that. It is specifically memory safety. And the in-depth doc that Fred mentioned at the beginning goes into detail about what that is. So very specifically, this requires unsafe is requires unsafe because it is doing something memory unsafe that cannot be validated. And that's how we plan on putting it on APIs in the BCL is this API, which includes anything doing interop because that escapes all memory safety of the BCL and runtime.
So I
doing
just
something that
opened.
cannot be validated upfront to be safe.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just opened the memory safety doc. I think that just got accepted in .NET Designs, and it has like array pooled rent and return as an open question. So I'm not sure like how
Right,
well
and
defined this is.
so that one's an open question for two reasons. One, because it allows because it uses GC allocate uninitialized memory, and therefore for something like say decimal, it can return an illegal bit pattern by default when you get a new rental. That is memory unsafe because it is a bit pattern that is illegal for decimal and may violate the invariance of the type and therefore allow memory unsafety.
So for byte, it's fine. Like according to this conceptual doc, we would like if we could do it based on the generic parameter, we would. Do we need to actually have something like that in this attribute to say only for these, or maybe allow list these generic parameters?
So that's where there's still an open discussion, and there's not been consensus internally in the discussions yet of array pool, rent and return. There's kind of two concepts of uninitialized memory, right? There's the one that I just covered, which is an illegal bit pattern for the type. But there's also the case of I don't know what this memory contents is. It's effectively equivalent to having done random initialization, but there's potential for security or data leakage across multiple rents and returns, as well as potential memory safety from ownership considerations. And so that's where there's still discussion ongoing on what needs to be done and whether we can do something like remove the uninitialized allocations and then it can be safe, or whether we need to mark it unsafe because of the ownership considerations and stuff like that.
So I mean that's still not very clear to me, like because anytime I do pooling without like a reset, like that's
Yes.
yeah, all right.
There are CWEs specifically for that case that are tied towards memory safety.
Okay, yeah. So if that's specific,
Because yeah,
I
like
mean, it's good to know if that's in scope or not, because to me that feels very different than where unsafe has typically been used previously. But you know, I'm not, you know, I don't claim to be an expert on the semantics of memory safety.
because I feel like if we were to add value string builder as public API without whatever the feature is called, move only structs, that would get unsafe because we would say if you're using this and the moment you pass it by value, you have destroyed the array pool, and you're going to have terrible memory safety. So there are definitely some rent returns that I think would easily get argued as requires unsafe. In the limit, it's all pooling requires unsafe because double returning is a problem.
So the current design isn't, I don't think, ambiguous. That is, there's no debate. It's either violates the rules or does not. Now, you may not like the rules, and you might wish to see them changed, However, I do not believe today there's any situation in which array pool, as it's currently implemented or as it's newly implemented, can ever be unsafe. It can never, in any construction, violate the memory safety rules that have been laid out.
I think it depends on the interpretation of managed by the runtime. You know, like, do you consider array pool as the runtime or not? You know, I think, you know, we have discussed it a number of times, and the problem is our design isn't pure. Like, if we disallowed global state, we would be on the Rust plan, and, you know, array pool would be unsafe. But disallowing global state is too harsh, so we are kind of in this like unpure state, and so we kind of need have these like difficult problems where, you know, something is either unsafe, but it's like not unsafe when you interpret the rules one way, you know.
So just to make sure we're on track here, though, does anybody feel strongly that this attribute should be in one namespace or another? Because like that is, I think that's what we're deciding right now, which namespace it should be in. Does anybody have like a really strong opinion that it should be in one particular namespace?
I'm like 75% in favor of wherever nullable lives. Code analysis. Just again, going back to, I think everything that's in compiler services that causes someone to have to import compiler services was a mistake to have been there. And that's a path that I hope we go down and don't keep adding more reasons that people need to import it in non-esoteric code.
So the reason I was asking was like, I'm like 55, 60% in favor of code analysis. Like, if everybody disagrees with me, I'm not putting up a fight about it. So like, if people have some strong opinions, like, kind of go for it. It's not going to ruin my day.
Yeah. So does anybody strongly feel it belongs in compiler services? All right. Sounds like me with 75 for code analysis is the strongest voiced opinion. So code analysis.
Sounds like a plan.
All right.
And then does anyone feel like it isn't a good idea to just pre-approve adding field when and if we get to that point?
I mean, from my perspective, we can pre-approve adding anything to attribute usage that would make it better for the compiler / language, since this is a feature for the compiler / language. So from my perspective, we could add them all now, or we could add them all later. Yeah.
Is there anything other than field that's missing?
Delegate isn't there currently.
Delegate isn't.
And Jan has pointed out how much pain that would cause.
Adding it to delegate is the painful thing.
Making delegates unsafe is a can of worms. Can of many worms. We just have more simple rules around. If you convert an unsafe method to a delegate, you need to be in an unsafe block, and then you're responsible for the lifetime of it.
Is there a world where you would want it on an enum member? Because I think enum is enum field.
We haven't seen a request for it from anyone.
Because that would be like an enum that has a mode that is considered unsafe.
Yeah, I could see in specific cases of low-level functionality, or if we were to take, for example, reflection in a particular direction, you could imagine the reflection targets to require the private members enum entry to be unsafe, because reflection over private members is unsafe It's an implementation detail, not memory unsafe, but conceptually dangerous.
But if you went that way, you would have to make casting from integers to enums
Right.
unsafe.
Yeah.
That's again way too harsh.
Yeah.
Binding flag, stop private.
Yeah, I mean, like it would be the writing binding flags private, etc. Like I could see a world where we'd say, hey, this is unsafe, and if somebody wants to get around it by casting from an int, then sure, the same way that they can get around the requires unsafe by doing reflection. Like reflection won't see the call.
I think the main point here would be that the enums themselves don't dereference any memory. So it wouldn't be the direct usage of the enum that would create unsafety. It would be the indirect usage that by setting the wrong value, you could effectively produce unsafety. So there's always something else that you could be marking unsafe here. So if we don't have the capability to mark enums unsafe, it doesn't seem like it would materially change anything.
I was just looking.
Yeah,
to see
if you really
what are
wanted
the
to
memory
do
ones.
that more precisely, you would have to go down the road of the nullable attributes, right? Where you have like parameters to them for like, when it returns this or takes this. But I don't think, we're trying to go that far. But you could see it like if we're gonna do it for array pool, maybe the version that clears is safer. But I don't know.
Yeah. So enum is the only member type that I see here that's not covered.
Actually, I don't think enum is the member type. I think that is enum as in the type declaration and field covers enum members.
That's right.
Okay.
And there's a very good reason why you would want to mark fields of an enum unsafe in the same way that you would want to mark like fields themselves.
Right. Then that's what I said. I thought enum was the members of the enum and not the type, and apparently nobody corrected me back when I stated that. So
it's still shaky. Like enum fields, I mean, theoretically, I don't know. I still think that's shaky. That there's probably a situation you can contrive with enum fields, but I think it's far less likely to end up in the same situation as fields in general, where it's like one person's reading X, another person's reading Y, and they see something. Like basically it crosses a boundary.
So returning to Mr. Tobe's question from earlier of does the compiler warn if it sees this in an unexpected place? If in .NET 12 we say fine, you can slap requires unsafe on the type, and that counts as applying it on all the members. Then now we would have that if you're using the 12 targeting pack but the 11 era compiler, it just doesn't see that attribute and doesn't warn that nothing's going to work the way that you want. Is that a state we're happy with, or do we want to preemptively tell the compiler?
That is not a supported scenario. We do not care if you do that.
We don't support using forward or targeting forward versions of .NET with current compilers?
No.
Okay. Fair enough.
There are lots of things that would potentially misbehave if you did that. Oh well.
I mean, that knowing that that's the I don't care territory is good. Yeah. So if your intention is just to get them on individual members, it seems like you've covered all the things except field, which I'll just go ahead and doodle in, and if you want to leave it out, leave it out. And like Tobe said, I think an FYI that it's being changed is all it would require. I don't think we need a meeting to change the attribute targets, especially on this type.
Sounds good.
I think we are planning a I don't think Igor's in the meeting, because I think he was the one. Oh, he is. I think Igor was putting together a list of the APIs that we want to mark with the attribute, and we plan on taking that to API review, and that's probably going to take a full session, just like Nullable did.
You think only one?
I was going to say full
At least
session.
one. We'll take at least one.
Nullable took months.
I actually have a practical question. We added support for DLL main type things in .NET. would that not mean that the module / the attribute itself should technically require, or could technically require unsafe? So do we need module or assembly marked at this point? Like simply talking about an assembly could put you in a memory unsafe situation.
I don't know how the compiler would then warn about it, right?
Fair enough.
Like, what's the thing that you referenced that would be unsafe?
Your only choice would be to then like suppress it by if you add like the reference. Yeah, because like
And like loading malicious code is outside of the memory safety. It's kind of different, kind of worms.
Yeah, something I haven't done well enough in the spec to call out is just that reflection is completely, it's a massive hole in this whole thing that is just out of scope. I would like to address it in a future
and
item.
on memory safety rules attribute, I don't think you meant version to be a writable field. Did you mean a get only property? Because it's
probably
capital and you took it as a constructor parameter.
Yeah. The compiler won't read it anyway. We look at the constructor argument.
Yeah.
So
Tanner?
I was going to say, I was going to make a comment about attributes, but you can't actually put an attribute on attributes. You can only put it on the class defining the attribute. But the question was specifically things like requires unreferenced code or the unsafe accessor attribute, which is used to access private implementation details outside of reflection and everything else. Which is not strictly memory unsafe, but likely memory unsafe. Is that going to be special case like extern, or is that just out of scope from what this covers?
I don't know that we have decided that.
I think this falls under, so I'll just address requires and reference code for the moment. That's just reflection, in which case it's the same hole as everything else reflection.
And unsafe accessor would be the same.
Unsafe accessor should be unsafe. That's probably something we should fix.
Yeah,
I
agree with
think
the
that
chat
will-
question. Aren't unsafe accessors already extern?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Extern, so they will be.
All right. So then they're covered by extern and stub generation and yada, yada, yada. All right. Anybody have anything else on this one? Sold. Thank you. Half the .NET org. Okay. It's the longest list of invited people for one issue that I've done. Everybody had their name stamped on this one. So
Glad to inflate the numbers. Right, thanks all.
all right. Do we have Mr. Sarpalis or someone to represent the UTF-8 JSON writer thing? Pushing it down. Roddick said he can't make it until 11. Oh, but this one's Roddick. Adam? I see Adam. So .NET runtime 124334 start a detached process.
Yes, hello everyone. So first of all, let me set the expectations and provide you some background. So for Aspire, I would like to add to the new process API the ability to start a detached process. A detached process is a process that outlives the parent when it quits. So for example, you start a Unix terminal, you start this process, you close the terminal. By default, it sends some kind of signal that closes all of the children application. So the idea is quite simple. However, the question is, how do we evolve and keep evolving the new option back in a way it does not become another process start info in a year or two? And namely, an option bag that has more than 24 of config options that some are Windows specific, some are Unix specific, some are Linux specific. So I have been having a conversation with Jan about this. My first proposal is to just extend process start option with start detached and start suspended. We can implement them on any OS. And if we do that, I would like to also remove the start suspended method based on the feedback from Jan, who pointed that if start suspended is just a method, we cannot really compose start suspended with, for example, start detached. The alternative design, and here it's again the question of like, how do we involve it moving forward? If you scroll down a bit, Jeremy, I was thinking that we could introduce two derivative types. So basically, whatever is cross-platform would stay within process start options. And in the future, if we were introducing some OS-specific things, we would be adding them to platform-specific option bags. So we would have Unix process start options and Windows process start options. That's one way of doing this. Another way is something that Jan has suggested, to maybe have a single derivative type, for example, advanced process start options, where we put all of the niche features, for example, specifying Windows creation flags. Yeah, this is the API usage. If we my other proposals, we don't need to go through them. I just listed them for completeness. They're just basically a builder pattern. Yeah. So again, I don't expect to get to solve this problem today, but I would be very happy to hear your opinion on how do you believe the option bag should continue to evolve and not become another mess in the future.
All right, since no one else is talking, I guess I'll say the idea of making the derived types is both good and bad. The problem being we don't have a good way of blocking unknown derived types. So when we made process start options, we sealed it so that we didn't have to deal with questions of inheritance. And if we start inheriting it, then now we do. Especially if we don't change it in this version to make it somehow non-derivable. I mean, right now it's not derivable because it's sealed, but I can't think of a way that we would be able to still let someone use it while not, or while blocking a type called Mac OS process start options, which gets completely ignored by the runtime and nothing tells anyone that that's true. And so I'd like to see a solution to that before we unseal the type.
Yeah, in general, we
like
could
you mean
limit
a
the
compile
inheritance by
time, right?
introducing a
sorry.
private internal constructor. However, currently we have exposed a public constructor that takes a file name.
Right.
Yeah. So if we made this constructor, let's say private internal, and introduce the factory method that is static, then it would work.
Right.
At least that's my only idea for.
Yeah. Alternatively,
managing
we
this
could make
inheritance.
I mean, if the process start, we said we were just going to make it throw if you gave it not the type that matched the runtime you're on or the explicit base class that was, had no further derived type. But that's actually that's a type.get type, and I think Jan will yell at you for that. No laughter from Jan. All right, I'm just killing it with jokes today. And
Stefan, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, sorry. So your request, Jeremy, is that there would be like a compile time warning if you derive from process start options and then like pass that derive type to process.start. Because like it would obviously throw if it was like an unrecognized derived type, right? Like
that's not.
you could, or you could. I mean, we don't need to block on that. Is my point. Like if that's something we're worried about, we just throw. Like we just check that and we throw.
It's an uncommon throw because, well, I
Okay.
can certainly see us saying we're going to type test for did you give me Unix and I'm on Windows, or did you give me Windows and I'm on Unix? Testing for are you a derived type that I don't know about is like that's not a
Harder.
language primitive. That's reflection.
But I mean, you can do an exhaustive check. It's not exactly reflection.
You can't
of,
do
like,
an exhaustive
everything
check.
you know about. I mean, of everything you think you should support, or right?
Right. But that my concern would be somebody pulls. I mean, it's a weird situation, but somebody makes a type called like Mac OS process start options. Maybe it's a thing that gets it, because it's being added in the future, going back to the evolution of things. So it gets added in a NuGet package for whatever reason, and it gets passed into the runtime. It's like, well, it's not a Unix, so it doesn't apply to me, and it's not Windows, so I'm not going to yell about it. But then it's just going to ignore all the options, and you've lost data.
But that's a choice, right? Like if this is a scenario we're concerned about, which I think honestly is pretty contrived, like we could have on every OS it check, like it's going to throw for the other platforms we do know about. Like just check, do the exhaustive check, take all the types you know about. Like what's the problem?
Right. I mean, yeah. So again, you could write it as if in the Windows version, if it's Windows, go do the Windows specific thing. Else if type.get type equal type of process start options, go run with the common thing, else throw. And then that would cover you gave me Unix on Windows, or you gave me a custom derived type.
Exactly.
It's just one of those. Right now we have the type system. We made the type sealed so that we didn't have to deal with the question, and this proposal is unseal the type and avoid the question. And that's my concern.
Yes, and again, my goal is to hide all of the advanced configuration options from 95% of the users who will never need them, and basically not pollute this common API surface. However, still make it possible for some advanced users to specify some other flags.
Yeah.
If they really need to.
This proposal doesn't do that. Because of inherited handlers and start suspended, in my mind, are the advanced options that pretty much nobody needs, right? Like what people need is like, here's a process name, here's a command line, here are redirected inputs, environment working directory, that sounds good. Once you start, starting suspended processes, like you are very advanced, right? I think the pivot about, if you go for the usability, like expose the common things and hide the rest, I don't think it aligns well with, put it. I don't think it's the same split as, put the cross-platform things in one place and the OS specific things in other place.
So I acknowledge that inherited handles is an advanced feature, start suspended also. I wouldn't mind moving it up to the derived types. Like I don't have super strong opinion about it. But my ultimate goal is to make sure that we avoid this problem with process start info where like there is a new C# developer, they try to start a new process and they see, oh, there is arguments and there is argument list. And which one should I use? So I really want to keep the base type simple and other things possible.
Not to be flippant, but we already have that problem now. We've just moved it even earlier for them. Do I use process start info or do I use process start options?
Yes, we do have this problem. However, I don't want to keep adding new features to process start info, especially with like one problem with process start info that I have as of today is that when you ask it to redirect the output, you basically have two options. You either derive the file handle or you redirect it to a synchronous pipe. So basically, and one of my goals is to be able to, redirect to null, redirect to file, to async pipe, whatever. So I don't want to keep extending this file, this type with new properties. And I believe that there are some things that are very niche out there. So my proposal is that process start info will keep working forever. However, for the sake of simplicity for the new high-level APIs, I would like to have a simple option back. However, to enable some advanced scenarios, I would like to have like an escape hatch.
Does that mean process start info would be deprecated?
No, it wouldn't be deprecated.
Are there things that I could use process start info for that I couldn't use process start options for, or vice versa?
Yes, for example, use shell execute. I don't want to implement it on Windows for the new API and mimic it on Unix.
But wouldn't it be fine to put on the Windows process start options? Like if you go the platform split, if your argument is just it's a Windows only feature, we now have a type for Windows only features.
Yes, but if you spawn shell executed, if you spawn such a process, you need to use a different syscall, and then you couldn't enable some of the Windows features that are possible when you use the create process syscall.
Yeah, if you specified too many options, it would throw. I mean, leaving it out's fine, but and sorry, Jan, I didn't mean to speak at the same time as you.
For the extending the process start info, right? It's like you don't have to support all the existing properties of the process start info in the new API. It's fine to say, this API supports this advanced subset, that API supports the kind of slightly different advanced subset, right? So I feel that most of the options in the process start info are valid. They are kind of not deprecated. Like some advanced users might want to use them and to use them. So it's I think like if we go with a new type, I think more than 80% of what's on process start info today will show up on the new type too.
Okay. Yeah. I want to hear all of your feedback, and this is a vision I had, the idea, and again, I wanted to avoid the fate of process start info at the first place.
But would you be fine with just saying, okay, we have like something like very small and tight that has just the few common options that everybody needs, and just use the process start info for all the advanced stuff and just keep adding keep the process start info the grab bag that it's today and just keep adding more to it. So once you are advanced user, you will see all the advanced options and you need to navigate the maze, so
I'll just say, like, and won't go too far in the weeds here, but this reminds me of me doing something similar in Kestrel for HTTPS options or like SSL options, and I kind of regret creating a new options type. Just we were considering deprecating the new one because most people still use the old one and just like backporting the features back. I don't think we will, but yeah, it is a downside.
I think I totally appreciate, Adam, the goal of creating a beautiful, clean API for the new stuff. But the new stuff is going to grow to subsume most of the quote, quote, old stuff. And just introducing a new thing introduces duplication and confusion, and we're going to start wanting to take both of them everywhere because someone's going to have a process start info that they're going to want to use with the new thing, and they're going to have a process start options that they're going to want to use with process.start. And now we've got it is the XKCD cartoon. Like, I'm going to introduce a new one to rule them all, and now we don't have 15, we have 16. I think we should accept the fact that there is some legacy here in process start info and either just add to it or add to it, and to Jan's point, only you have something that is maybe even a base class of process start info that is just the super simple bare minimum things that every, the 95% case needs. And that doesn't grow to accommodate anything else. And for anything else, we put more things on process start info when we accept the fact that there are some things on there that we would design differently if we could today.
Yeah, and like to actually go deeper into the Kestrel thing, like just because I do think there are some comparisons, like in .NET 10 we had an API to look at like the client hello bytes and stuff, and we added that to kind of the older, more process info kind of API with the idea that like people using the newer API, which is technically the most capable thing, could write like connection level middleware and read the client info themselves anyway, which is what people are doing now. But of course, like immediately in .NET 11, people see this feature and they're like, well, why is it not on the new options type? And it's just like, ugh. And it's just like the duplication is kind of annoying. And the plan for .NET 11, for what it's worth, is just to make it like an explicit middleware you can call like .use client hello handler or something like that. But so it'll just be separate from options. But like, yeah, I just wish I hadn't kind of done that in the first place. Like,
Yeah, thank you. It's very, very valuable feedback. So,
So far this sounds like in a proposal that is, let's add start detached to the new process start option, that people are arguing, let's unapprove the new process start option.
yes, and I'm perfectly fine if we reject my API proposal. As I said, my goal is to make system diagnostic process suck less. So based on what both architects have just said and what Stefan has just shared in terms of his experience, it sounds like we all agree that having two option bugs is not the good place to be. And the middle ground would be if process start info has derived from process start option, just to keep this, in a way, simplify the API service.
I would say though, like if we were willing to deprecate process start info, which is again the mistake that I kind of made with HVS options, because we kept the old one around for like the simple use cases that were easy enough. My opinion might change on it, but without obsoleting it. And I understand it would be crazy to obsolete because so many people use it. So,
No.
Yeah.
I don't want to create new problems.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
supposed to fix the few existing ones.
Yeah, it's a tough space to be in. Like,
okay. So based on the feedback I got, I think we can finish for today. I will create another proposal where I make it a base type with just 4 properties and then add more advanced things to process start info. Does that sound good?
I am thinking about the base type, like if it's just 4 properties, should we just have a method with for arguments? That's kind of the convenience method, and so the inserting base type to an existing type, it's kind of messy. It's
I hear you. So basically, all of the high-level APIs, they would be accepting path, arguments, and let's say optional environment variables and working dictionary and working
well,
directory.
There's just
or let's stick with arguments and the path. And if you need more, then you need to use process start info.
Yeah, like how many APIs do take the process start options currently?
Like merged, none. The idea, like
but
in process, safe process handle.start, and all of the upcoming high-level APIs, where you would have something like process.capture output, process.stream read lines, stream output lines, things like this.
Yeah, but like my thinking is like that might not be too bad. I would have to see the whole list to down. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I will think more of it. Big thanks everyone for the feedback. I'm really glad that I have avoided introducing the option bugs. If you believe it's a bad idea, and it's better to learn from somebody else's mistakes.
Well, but we already have, or rather, the plan already is to, right?
Yes. So the option bug was already merged. None of the APIs supported, and it was released in one preview.
Okay, so like safe process handle that start didn't get added yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to be sure, yes, it did not get merged.
None of the PRs got merged. One got approved, two are still work in progress.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks, Todd.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Discussion. Yes. All right. I think that's what we said. So the discussion on this made it seem like we're already regarding process start options, and maybe it should go back to process start info and be rethought from there. Have I captured the feeling? No one said no. All right.
I gave a thumbs up, but I forgot that you probably don't see the screen. It might be on the broadcast, but
fair enough. Yeah. All right, inception time. If I only go to there, it won't get crazy. I only see this big of the meeting. So things on Teams don't happen as far as I'm concerned. All right. Yep. Do we have Radek now?
Yes.
Cool. All right. .NET Runtime 74404. tar archive creation should allow dereferencing soft and hard links to the same file.
Okay, so the tar serialization format has support for symlinks and hard links. And currently, when we encounter symlinks, we extract them correctly. But sorry, I didn't have time to read the issue. And anyway, we need a way to specify whether when creating the archive, we should dereference those symlinks. So basically embed the contents of the file as a regular file, or whether actually embed the information that this should be a symlink to some path. And basically do similar things when we encounter hard links on the file systems, whether we should deduplicate it and embed the file twice, so that the other side doesn't have to care about hard links, or whether we actually should embed it as actual hard link entry. And similarly, when extracting the archive, whether we should replicate that on the disk, or whether we should deduplicate it when extracting and duplicating the data on the disk. So a couple of additional options around whether how we should treat soft links and hard links. The proposal is, since we have been introducing also other options, is to create options classes and add those as additional properties. So we have tar create options, which is supposed to be used for tar file.create from directory. And then we have tar writer options, which applies when somebody is using the tar writer itself. And for extract options, again, it's for tar file extract to directory. I believe that later there should be some usage examples, maybe. Yeah. I believe it's pretty much the summaries, and I'll be ready for questions.
Is there currently a way to do this like without extracting? Or does this add a way, or do you have to like extract a file system?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, it's like there's no like, this is net new features, right? Like there's no way to like enumerate a tar file like in memory with like
I see.
without
So
extracting.
when
It's a
extracting,
question. I just don't know the space. Sorry.
yeah, so there is a class called tar reader, which allows you to basically scan the tar archive from start to finish, and it allows you to enumerate the entries there. It will tell you whether the entry is supposed to be symlink or a regular file or directory or whatever else we support. And then it's up to you how to process it. And if it's regular data, then you can access the data stream, and it gives you the contents. When it's a symlink, I think there is a property link target, link name. It's called, which will be populated if the entry is supposed to be a symlink.
I think.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I just for context.
Yeah,
I don't have really.
So the tar extract options are basically for us to specify how the helper LPI, the extract to directory, should behave in respect to those files.
In principle, all of our compression APIs have a they have like a stream layer that understands the compression, then an archive layer that understands the file formats, and then they have a file system layer that maps the archive format to an external file system. And so these APIs sit at that top layer, the file system extraction layer. And they should depend on only public functionality at the lower layer, I believe, right, Radek?
Yes. So at least as far as I've seen in the code base, we only use the public API surface.
So in the options classes, in particular with regards hard links and soft links, I wonder if the average caller is smart enough to understand the meaning of dereference here.
Good question. We are open to better name suggestion. The reference was taken from the tar utility GNU tar, which has command line parameter dereference and dereference softlinks, I think. So the proposal decided to use the same name, but if we can come up with something more descriptive, I am not opposed.
Yeah, like, because reading the, when set to true, it'll be a copy. And it's like, oh, so maybe instead of dereference, somewhere in here it should be like copy instead of hard link, or,
Do we also need an option just because, like with soft links or hard links, like is there a reason to like disable those altogether? You know what I mean? Like don't copy, like don't even extract it. Like just because it's another thing to potentially think about. Like at least with soft links, right, it could end up creating like a loop. Am I wrong on that? Can a soft link to a parent? Maybe not.
I think it can, because the soft link can
Right.
go across file systems, so you could certainly, even if you had to take the file systems offline because LN wouldn't let you do it because it would detect the cycle, you can certainly make it happen with complicated mount points.
An enum is what I was going to suggest, right? Because then you could have 3 states. Like strip it because I don't want to have to write because I don't expect any soft or hard links, right? And I just don't want to have to write the code that reads the produced directory to deal with that. And if I can remove it, I know, like, at least it's a new directory, it won't have any soft or hard links, which seems convenient. So that could be one mode of the enum. The other could be like copy, and the default would be what it is, like just reproduce them.
Yeah, sort of a ignore, duplicate link, and reject.
Sure. One thing to account for is that those API are like convenience and are not like, how shall I say it? They are not supposed to be used with untrusted input, let's say. So if you know that you don't want to, that there might be something that you don't want to in the archive, then you probably shouldn't be relying on those APIs. For example, most recently, we have been asked to implement sparse files, which is a type of entry which can pack, let's say, gigabyte file into 500 byte entry. So if you don't trust that the input is safe, you probably shouldn't call extract to directory because it can just fill your disk.
Point taken. However, like, it's not useful strictly in a security context. It could just, you know what I mean? You could trust the input, but you just don't care about those files. That being said, I understand that might be a foot gun.
Yeah. I mean, I can also hear Levi right now asking, have we written that down? Because I could certainly see
Yes,
a service.
the PR got merged yesterday.
Okay, because it's like I can certainly see a service taking in a tar bundle as stuff to process, and they'd be like, I've extracted it into a sandbox directory, and if you're saying that's not safe, that they need to use the reader, then I don't know that that would be obvious to the average consumer.
We have received an MSRC which calls us to take a look at the documentation and update it, but it's not really related to this proposal.
Yep. Well, that does, saying that the expected inputs are only files you created means that the reject mode for link evaluation does fall outside of the scope. So it is a little related. Yeah, so it's been pointed out in chat that certainly matching existing terminology is good, but I think matching existing terminology is good when people understand the existing terminology. So I don't think we should follow it blindly, but if we do feel that people understand what dereference means for both the creating and for the extracting, then the names are fine. I'm just calling them into question. Because to me, dereference false sort of makes it sound like don't include, but dereference false means leave it as a link, and dereference true is make it a copy, and that just is not where my brain immediately went.
I agree with that as someone who's like, yeah, basically only always has to Google, or I can now ask an LLM how to run tar commands and stuff, but I don't know. XZF, effectively what this is, something like that. There's an XKCD about this.
XCVF, or if you want to be fancy, CJVF. That's bzip2 instead of gzip. And then just replace C with X. Yeah. Or T. You can test it, which file is this? So yeah. I will say chat has asked why we would need create and write as distinct options, and if the only difference is going to be the include base directory, then I would probably say maybe don't make create a different type yet and have it just be create has include base directory, comma, writer options. And then once we feel that create gets a second custom option, then now it can get an options type.
Yeah, in the alternative proposal, this has been called out, and one alternative is to basically, instead of duplicating the properties in create options, we have target options to contain writer options, or we just don't have target create options at all, and basically add only the overload which accepts both include base directory and writer options. Because basically all the properties except include base directory are then forwarded to writer options, which is then passed to tar writer.
Yeah.
Or not tar writer, but basically the oh, actually, yes, tar writer, yes.
Yeah, and include base directory, that's the difference between tar and then giving it a directory name and cding into the directory and doing tar dot, right? Like include base directory is include the name of the directory that you're in the path, and false is pretend I cd'd into it so the name doesn't show up anywhere.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so why not just copy hard links and copy soft links, other than it doesn't match the base API? Like, I think that's clear enough. Honestly, I think it's clearer than to the layman. To me personally, I guess, counting myself as the layman.
Copy hard link does mean that you copy the link or the contents.
Does dereference mean you copy the link or the contents? Copy at least implies it's like more expensive than dereference.
Well, the reference, at least to programmers, implies that you look at the thing that's at the target of the pointer or the link or whatever.
Sure. I mean, you have to look at the target to create the file that's the soft link. But I get what you mean, kind of. I mean, I do get it.
Yeah,
but I don't think...
Yeah, for me, I think the problem is it's ambiguous to me if the dereference is applying to the hard link entry or the hard link target. Because dereference hard links false on extract makes it sound like if an entry type says hard link, don't read it. So
Right.
that's why to me dereference here feels like skip instead of make there be two distinct copies on disk instead of one with a hard link. Just because there are two different places that are being dereferenced here. And again, the best alternative name that I can come up with is copy contents of hard links, which even to me feels weird.
Copy hard link content, copy soft link content. Hard link and soft link are like the adjectives at that point. I think that's very clear. It's not too bad.
Yeah, that one at least is unambiguous.
Let's see here. Chat has thrown out follow instead of dereference, and then we got an independent suggestion of enum link handling, skip link, and copy contents. And another suggestion of the enum.
I mean, the advantage of the enum is that we can name it in a way that it makes it clear what we are going to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to add skip to the enum. We could still do it. We just have to come up with the enum name, and then, I mean, it's even more names. But yeah,
indeed. Yeah, and then there's also the suggestion that the extract and the writer don't need to use the same words. So, yeah, so Frederick suggests that for extract, that keep hard links and keep soft links makes sense to him, and he doesn't have suggestions for the writer side. I do think that if we came up with a link strategy or link handling or whatever, then preserve link and copy contents work for both sides. This could also be preserve hard links and preserve soft links and default to true.
We could use the word preserve in both, right?
Yeah. In both cases, like it's preserve means the link is there, and then you get to find out what happens to false, because again, false is ambiguous. If is it ignored or is the file duplicated? I think the trouble is on all these things, there is the ignore it interpretation of whichever way you don't go. So the enum may be the only way we can get good names if we think good names are important.
I'm probably not opposed to that.
And I think I still see Adam's card. So is this a thing that would make sense for IO in general, or should it be a tar specific thing?
Well, I don't know any other place where we would use it on right now on the spot.
I don't feel comfortable, or I'm not an expert when it comes to I/O and hard links and symlinks. David Cantu is the person who implemented all of it, so I would refer to him for the answer.
Fair enough. I guess is because zip doesn't preserve links. I don't think.
No.
LZMA's compression without structure. I'm just trying to think. Is like because if we put this under system formats tar as tar link strategy, are we basically just going to copy it into a bunch of other places? So, sort of, do we end up with something like that in system IO, or do we end up with something like that in every namespace that wants to do it?
Yeah, like I can't think of any other compression or like area that we have where we would use this. Like we said, zip doesn't support it. I don't believe 7-zip does either. That's also basically only like regular files.
That's why you always tar first, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, would we accept this like pending like threat modeling on whether we think ignore makes sense? I guess it might change if it makes sense for the extract of the writer versus the yeah, it's similar.
Let's see here, and then chat says that while dereference is the name of the option, the man page explains dereference as follow symlinks, so that dereference changes itself to follow in its expansion.
Is counting myself as a representative for all laymen, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it maybe, I feel like I am a target user of this API though. Like eventually, someday I might use it, right? I don't know if follow is clearer than copy contents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that like for these options, the enum is most descriptive and most clear what it actually does. And like since we are adding it, I'm not opposed to adding the ignore as well.
Yep. And we also get to decide if we're adding an enum in addition to naming the enum and naming all the fields, we get to decide which one gets the coveted 0 position. But
yeah, I would have to check what we have been doing as a default, but I think we have wanted to change the default to replicate the link structure and like basically make this breaking change. I would have to take a look at the PR which we have for this, because I know that we decided that the desired behavior is different than what we have now.
yeah, what does copy contents do when it sees a soft link to a directory?
Copies, right? I would assume. I hope.
That's a good question.
I mean, you could easily create like a bomb that way with recursive, but like you said, you got to trust the input.
Yep.
That being said, yeah, you just have to.
Especially if you add ... as a symlink to ... or
I'm
to
not sure if the, because I thought that the link target in the tar archive has to be a file, but I'm actually not 100% sure about it, and directory might actually be allowed there.
I think so, because it's used for like package managers on Linux, right? Like distros.
Yeah, you can definitely on Linux have a symlink that is a directory. Windows may not allow it, but
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm 100% sure, but I would assume it would be allowed.
I see. Okay, so previously we would follow the links and we would duplicate it in the archive, and when we wanted to raise a PR which would basically store hard links as a hard link entry, the question came up whether we actually want to have an API to control that. So yeah, the breaking change we are talking about is when creating the archives. And when we are extracting, we already create symlinks by default when we encounter them in the archive. So, and the option to control that has been added since we already touched the surface, and we are the way to control whether we create links in tar to have like a symmetry in the API to also allow not extracting the links when extracting the archive. So the default should be preserve link in that case. And maybe add copy and have ignore be the last one. Not sure if that matters, but
Yeah, I mean, it's the zero value matters because that's if you make a field, what value does it get by default, and anything after that doesn't super matter. I agree that part of my brain is screaming at me that copy content should be closer to preserve link. Ignore shouldn't be separating them, but I'm really fighting that right now.
I would put ignore at the end. Like, I mean, if we're gonna have it, why not?
Fine.
OCD.
Okay. Yeah. So someone in chat asked what would the purpose of ignore being here be, and really I think it's just for contradistinction. I don't know that anybody would ever use it, but it would be saying that picking preserve link is not ignore, picking copy contents is not ignore, and picking ignore if you pick it is not the other two. Also, it makes it so there aren't two options and people ask why wasn't it a Boolean.
Okay, and what about whether we want to have create options as a separate class, or do we want to basically, instead of that, taking the include base directory and writer options, basically replace one parameter with two in the proposed API?
Yeah,
because so far there's like lots of duplication between the two.
Until there's evidence that create would get further unique options, I would leave create options out. And make the create method take include base directory and the tar writer options. Is my vote.
Sounds good.
And by the way, anybody who's only here so that we can get to the stream wrappers, the clock says we're not talking about that today. But you're welcome to stay and chime in. All right. So does anybody believe we should add create options now versus just making create take a writer options and include base directory? Okay. Easy. Deleted. We can always add it later. So if we're adding the enum, we need to name it. Strategy is one of our suffixes. Handling is another of our suffixes. Does anybody care about a suffix / want to point me at the most applicable prior art?
I think the way it's now written is good.
And so now we change. So for writing, you want to preserve, for all of them, you want to preserve link by default, right?
Yes.
This is, on the one hand, implied by it being 0. On the other hand, being explicit doesn't hurt. Any feedback on my suggested names of preserve link, copy contents, and ignore?
I like it.
Okay.
Other than like I don't like we could get rid of ignore, but otherwise seems fine.
Yep. Chat suggests tar link strategy should be tar linking strategy. Does anyone want to?
I like
think
the
that's
name
right.
as it is.
Yeah, but I like the shorter name. Do we normally put ings in?
Linking suggests we're creating links.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I mean, we kind of are.
When we are extracting them, we create them on the file system.
So when it says dereference hard links, we're creating hard links.
Oh, sorry. I guess dereference hard links now becomes hard link strategy.
Right. Yeah, we definitely have to rename the properties. Yeah.
Yeah. So when writing, if the strategy is preserve link, then if you see a hard link in the archive, you create a hard link on the file system.
Yeah, I think hard link and soft link are themselves adjectives, and tar link. I don't want to put like linking everywhere. I guess it's more adverb. I don't know.
Linking just sounds wrong.
It just sounds wrong. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, because to me, yeah, it is the strategy about what you do when you see a file system link. So
right,
link feels better.
Yeah, I think it's more of an adjective than an adverb. Is that, am I remembering English grammar right? Anyway.
Gerunds are. Gerunds are, yeah. It's more a noun than a gerund, though gerunds are nouns. So I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. So hard link strategy, soft link strategy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Someone has asked why is it tar writer options but tar extract options? Shouldn't they both be nouns or both be verbs? I think the writer is a noun because it can be taken by a tar writer, and extract only exists as a method. So I think they make sense.
I had the same question when I first saw them, and then I used the same argument to convince myself that they were correct.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay.
Did you see the thing? Good chat point. If we use symbolic link elsewhere in APIs, we might have to consider that.
Yep. I was about to voice that one. So here we say hard and soft, but there's a suggestion that elsewhere we say hard versus symbolic. However, if the mode teams, I don't need the control bar. I've never needed the control bar. Thanks. That's not the right kind of mode.
Entry.
Format?
Entry type.
Entry type says symbolic link, so I think we should match that term.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay. Create. What's create look like? All right, so create from directory would be include base directory and then tar writer options.
Yes.
And extract stays as it is. Writer stays as it is. Okay. What? Ah. All right. Is there anything that we have missed?
I think this is consistent, but why like directory name and file name instead of path, or like directory path, file path?
Where are you looking?
Just in the create extract, we were using like file name and directory name. Like file.open takes a path, I think. But yeah, I guess this is locally consistent.
Yeah, it's matching the other overloads, which is, I'd say, the most important consistency.
All right. I missed that part.
I have create from directory right here. We can check extract to make sure it matches. But yeah, destination directory name.
Never mind then.
All right. Do not delete that. Yay, undo. My favorite thing in the history of computing is undo. Only when it's proper undo. I hate undo and undo undo. I do like redo though. All right, so we removed tar create options and exploded it. We renamed, or we created tar link strategy. So we're putting it in tar because we don't think it belongs anywhere else. We renamed the properties and we renamed soft to symbolic. So I think I annotated everything. I think the proposal's right, and I don't hear anybody complaining about anything else.
Can I make a quick observation?
Sure.
I know we have a proposal, a long-standing proposal for directory copy. We don't have that in the libraries yet. Could there be any overlap between tar link strategy with that? I don't know if you discussed this. I just joined.
You are coming just in time, so can you repeat the question?
To answer David, which may give Radek the question, I did ask if the link strategy belonged in System.io, and Adam wasn't sure, and that may be why you got tagged in. So, if we think that the same enum with the same members belongs to a more general I/O, I think we can remove the tar prefix and move it to System.io. But if we want to hedge, we would just have two of them if we get there.
System.io.link strategy though, it's like way too generic. In my opinion, like it would have to be link copy strategy or something like file link, or because it applies to directories too. Not sure about the name, but I don't think you could just remove tar.
So yeah, David, if you think that there's a strong feeling that it's going to be this, I guess if it's this version, we can always merge it later. If we go across versions, then they'll be forever duplicated.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the end of the world either. Like if we add the directory copy API later and it's directory link strategy. So. Oops, but it's not too bad.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. I don't have a strong case for it. It just came up to my mind.
Okay. But yes, the question was asked before, and we couldn't come up with an obvious second place that would use it, so we left it in system formats tar.
I think you could imagine any archive format that represents hard links and symbolic links using a similar flag.
Yeah.
Do you have a suggestion? So I mean, that's an argument for something more generic. Do you have a suggestion on like where we put it and what we name it?
Radek, does zip, like, hypothetically, I see this as more generic. I think it's fine to put in system IO. I'm trying to think, do we see can we do the thought experiment of, do we know of another archive format that would support this? Would our current mappings make sense? The directory case, like, I don't see harm in this one thing, but then, if we just had two, maybe we can cringe and ignore it. But if we had like four, right, like, zip hard link behavior, every archive format one could imagine, and then have all these, it would start to smell. So yeah, I can see the proposal of putting it in IO and just removing the tar prefix.
And just calling it link strategy.
Yeah.
System IO link strategy.
Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah. So the CPIO format apparently turned up as a second archive format that supports it. Since it's now been on screen, someone's going to ask for it, but for which I apologize.
So zip does not care about hard links, it just duplicates files?
Zip does not support symlinks. It has no way to represent them. It can only represent files. It has some like additional block for Unix stuff. Like I literally just search link in the specification. There are like 4 occurrences and none of them talks about symlinks or hard links. So I don't think it's useful for zip in any way. And 7Z format, I also can't find anything. But that might be just like being too slow.
I burned a few Copilot credits and got a table that tells me that zip in POSIX mode does support symbolic links, CPIO, 7Z format, tar 7Z format, RAR, WIM, which is the Windows image format of, like, that was what they used, and then ISOs have limited support.
Okay.
That WIM was the drinking parties.
It was that too, Brian Valentine's thing. Yeah. Windows informational meeting.
Someone in YouTube suggested like link replication as the prefix, which I think is better than just link if we remove tar, maybe. And then changing strategy to mode. So they were suggesting link replication mode. I kind of like both. And then we could change the properties from strategy to mode.
Yeah, I mean, we could also strategy mode, handling.
I like mode.
All right, so presumably because this is all about dealing with file system crap, it's system IO. So the only shared space that I can think of for this is system IO. Does anyone disagree? So now, as a shared thing, again, I do think that preserve still makes sense as a default value. It's what you see is what you get. So tar goes away.
I like link replication mode. No notes on the YouTube suggestion on that. Good job, Mizard XYT, in my opinion.
I can't tell if it's Mizard like Eddie Izzard or if it's Wizard. That's why part of why I often try not to pronounce people's names and just call everyone chat. Okay. So do we like link replication mode? Stefan said yes. Did Eric drop a bomb of move it to IO and then leave?
Yeah. I think it's fine though. Like I'm honestly, I was before we added the replication, I was like it's a little too generic, but I'm happy.
I think I want to say we should move it to System IO, but we no longer have quorum to name it in System IO. So I want to just slap approved on what we already did, and then Roddick, if you can open a follow-up issue to generalize Tarlink strategy. You don't have to be the one to represent it. We just need it written down that it's a thing we want to do.
Okay, I can do that.
Open it and assign it to Eric St. John.
Yeah.
Because we need to come up with a name that we think is going to work for the directory copy, for CPIO, etc., and doesn't feel like it belongs to linked lists, which is part of the. So the hard, like, literally, this is the hardest word or the hardest piece of moving it to System IO. But yeah, so given that everyone was happy, yeah, I think I like propagation better than replication.
Yeah, and no matter how propagation, I like replication, but I definitely like mode more than strategy. I'll say that. Like strategy reminds me of like Gang of Four stuff, which I mean technically this might match, but like not.
Well, because the problem is if we're going to rename strategy, then we now call into question the names of these properties.
Those are modes. Those are modes. You just change strategy to mode. Like they're synonyms. That's fine.
I'm sorry, Radek.
It's fine. It's like this is my last meeting of the day, and I'm just going to sleep. So.
All right. I think we have to call it needs work, and we'll bring this back next week of figure out what to call it in IO. Just because if we change on mode or mode, strategy, handling, behavior, kerfluffle, whatever, like we're going to end up renaming the properties on the reader or on the writer and extract options here. So I think if we're going to move it, we want to know what the final name's going to be before we approve these. So I'm going to call it needs work.
I expect you will not need me for that discussion.
That's fair.
I think that's very fair.
Yeah.
And I would almost like say this is like conditionally approved, but yeah, however you want to do it. I think we can bike shed on this name without, if you're fine with, yeah, if you don't have a strong opinion.
I'm fine with the rest. I don't really care about the name, so I will be happy with whatever you decide is good.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, the only thing that should change from the tar options past this point is what's the suffix on these property names.
Yep.
So system IO link replication mode, system IO link propagation strategy, STRAT. Okay. All right. Updated and totally got nerd sniped.
And then Eric's like, we could change it to a bool. All right.
All right. So
I mean, if we
yeah.
get rid of ignore, maybe. Yeah.
Again, the problem, ignore is there just to say you're not picking it. Like as a Boolean, it's unclear if preserve is preserve versus ignore or preserve versus copy. And
yeah.
And we're not going to name a property tar writer options dot true for preserve or false for copy. So, and yes, we could drop ignore if we wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
On that bombshell, thanks everyone for participating, and definitely good input. And we will tackle this bike shed probably next week at our same .NET time on our same .NET channel. And wow, I totally misspelled propagation in that, and I don't care. Until then, I think it was Spanish. So hasta luego.
You just hedged. I wasn't sure which letter it was either. Oh, A, either. Both. All right.
Thank you. See you.
Ciao.